This brief reflection is going to be on Sophocles' significant play Antigone. Sophocles was the second of the great Greek tragedians. Aeschylus was probably the greatest of them all. Sophocles was second, and Euripides third in the breadth and depth in which they grappled with the difficult, the troubling issues of humans' journey through time. Antigone is the play, and I'll reflect shortly with you on the relationship of that to the vaccine crisis we are with today, particularly in the vaccine crisis, the people who are pro-vaccine, those who are anti-vaccine, those who are for two vaccines, passports, this sort of stuff, and those who are very much opposed to that and feel they're being bullied by the state and being forced essentially into having vaccines and now passports, people losing jobs whether if they're not vaccinated, and then the tension that goes on with this. Now, Antigone very much is a story about this. It's a story primarily about a city-state historically at war, and two brothers colliding, sibling clashes, a very common issue within the past and the present, over how the city should be run. What happens inevitably in any war is one side wins, the other side loses. The two brothers were Antigone's brothers. They both died in the war, and the one who becomes the head of the state, the victorious state, is Creon, which is Antigone's one of his relatives. Creon, the state, takes the position that Antigone's brother, who is what's seen as the traitor to the state, should not be given a meaningful state funeral. He should be left out for the vultures and the eagles to pick his body apart, and this is how we treat traitors, or people who do not obey the state or who fight against the state. Uh, Antigone says, listen, I could differ with my brother, but he should be treated well. He should be treated kindly. He should be given a proper funeral. Creon took the position, no, someone who disobeys the state does not heed the need for the common good, security, predictability. They had just come out of war. There was chaos, people interpreting how to make sense of different ways of understanding how the state should be run. They're very much, so Creon is the person who takes the view that the role of the state is to bring order, predictability, the common good, safety for one and all, i.e., group rights, state rights. Antigone takes the position that, yes, the state does have an important role to play, but there are other virtues at stake: care for your family, care for siblings, and individual rights should play a key role also. So we get the clash between Creon and Antigone, between group rights and individual rights, and which should win the day at the end of the day. The state, which is very concerned with safety, predictability, the common good, legislation, and making sure as much as possible one and all are safe and secure. What happens when it oversteps its place, in which it represses difficult questions raised from the individual rights perspective, which Antigone embodies in that sense in attempting to bury her brother. As the story unfolds, because it is a tragedy, and what Sophocles is doing in this tragedy is what happens when two sides in a difficult issue, we can use the vaccine one, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, what happens when two sides freeze or absolutize their own interpretation, and they don't see their limitations in their perspective. The other is the evil, my own position is the true one. So you have a polarized way of interpreting reality. Both sides freeze and bomb their own position. They don't hear the other. So it's a situation of polarization leading to conflict. In this particular play, Antigone, since Creon is the one in power, he has the authority in the state. He essentially says, in fact, what's going to happen is Antigone is going to be buried. He gives her a little bit of food. They go into a cave. The door is closed, the big rock. She can survive a couple of days. And now Antigone was to be married to Creon's son, situation like that. So the son comes to his father and said, you know what you've done? This is my future wife. She and I are going to rule this city-state in time. Can you not soften? Can you not ease a little bit? And so Creon begins to soften just a little bit. He realizes the implications of his decisions. This is not sort of a frozen abstract argument, but in fact it has personal implications in real people's lives, within a family, within a community. He minimally relents, and the son goes to the burial area of Antigone. He rolls back the huge stone, but Antigone has committed suicide. And at this point, so he goes back to his dad. He commits suicide, and you got inevitably a ripple effect of tragedy. What Sophocles is doing in Antigone, which is actually quite applicable for the vaccine crisis we're living through, amongst many other issues, it's not just applicable to the vaccine issue. So, what happens when people interpret issues in a way in which, first of all, they lack basic humility? Um, they absolutize their own interpretation and they demonize others rather than saying, listen, we all need to learn from one another, particularly those who are opposed the most. Gandhi once said, keep your enemy the closest to you. When you don't do that, what you get, as Sophocles rightly understood, is when people polarize, turn on one another, caricature one another, what in fact is happening is a tragedy in the making. And of course, Antigone is the tragedy. And in that sense, we can see the vaccine tensions, polarization between state and society, between individual rights and group rights, one in which is being played out again in the vaccine crisis, of which the great play by Sophocles, Antigone, is just being recycled again and again. So we have to be careful, as Sophocles would warn us today. Don't freeze uncritically in one's own position. What is the good in the other position? What may be the limitations of my position? And if that is not done, then what in fact is happening is a tragedy that's about to unfold, in which one and all are going to be hurt and harmed, that not much good is going to come from this. And so Sophocles, the great second of the great Greek tragedians, remains today to warn us in this vaccine crisis, amongst many other things. Be wary of freezing in an absolute way one's own interpretation of a difficult issue in the culture wars.